You're listening to I Love It When, and I'm your host, Mo. I'm a speaker, coach, and connector. You're in the right place if you're looking for some inspiration and you're ready to truly embrace who you are. My intention with this podcast is to help you see that you are so much more powerful than you realize. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of I Love It When. My name is Mo, and today I have a very special guest, Kai Bertrand. And I wanted to start off this episode by giving you a little introduction to Kai and sharing about why I asked Kai to be on the podcast. Well, one of my top reasons is this podcast is all about sharing people's stories and bringing on different guests to help you explore, get curious, and learn something that maybe you had no information about before. And so when I first met Kai, it's probably been over a year now when I first I met her at the Metaphysical Wellness Fair, the MeWe fairs. And if you're listening, we talk about the MeWe fairs a couple of times. I highly recommend checking them out either through Facebook, or you can go to the website. Just look up MeWe Fairs Pacific Northwest, and they happen multiple times a month all over Washington and Oregon. I don't believe she's been to Idaho yet, but check them out. They're amazing. And I knew I wanted to have Kai on the podcast, and it all came down to just the right time. She has an amazing energy, and I just love her very practical approach as well to how she talks about energy and how she does her work. So I'm really excited for you all to get a chance to hear her story today and a lot of examples about how she works. The other thing I would want to share too, and I talked about this a little bit on the last episode, or maybe the episode before the last one, losing track. One of the things that I have done in my life is looked at where I have fear, and then I turn and I face that fear directly. Because I recognized that most of the time when I faced that fear and I looked at it, whatever it was not nearly as scary as I thought it was. And so when it comes to my spiritual growth, especially, I had some things that were stuck in my mind from different TV shows I watched, movies, um, probably parts from the Catholic faith, and then different Christian churches that I'd been to over the years, different ideas around ghosts, spirits, being possessed, demons, all these different things really scared me. And I was done being afraid. It was really in my early 30s where I started to really look at what is this fear of the dark that I have, and why has it become more of an issue now in my 30s than I remember it being for most of my life. And so as I started to look at it, I really recognized how much of it was influenced by what I was allowing in my brain. And one of those things was this fear of being possessed. And now I'm someone who my entire life, I really have not watched scary movies. I just don't. And I was able to say no to that, no to different friends that wanted to watch certain things. It's either like psychologically scary, or just bloody, or movies where kids are hurt. I just can't watch them. And so I would remove myself from the room. And I don't care what people think. I wasn't going to put that in my head because I knew that it influenced my thoughts. And so I wasn't exposed to a lot of excessively scary things, but that just shows you like what exposure can do. And so as I've done more research and had more experiences in spiritual growth, I've just recognized how much of a better understanding I have around how energy works, what entities are, the control that we actually have to determine what they're allowed to do, and how powerful we are. And so this topic and what Kai, as a kahuna healer, what she does, it's incredible to me. And it goes directly in the face of the fear that I've had. And so I was just, of course, fascinated by her story and all the things that she's experienced. And so this episode is a longer one, but I've decided I'm not going to cut it into 2 episodes, because if you want to listen to the whole thing, you'll get to listen to it all at once. um, she is just a beautiful human with so many different experiences to share. And so I'm sure this won't be the first time that she's on the podcast. Okay, so before I get too much further, let me give you the 411 on Kai, and I'll give you an idea of what we talk about in the episode as well. So Kai is a kahuna, which is the Hawaiian version of a shaman. She is an author, mentor, speaker, teacher, and energy healer. She has ability to she has developed the ability to see, hear, feel, taste, and smell to receive information from the spirit realm. She has opened doorways for the dead to pass through and opened windows for the living to see the potential of their future. She has used energy to help those who wish to heal and for those who wanted to return to source. Her strongest ability is seeing angels, ghosts, demons, and things she doesn't have names for. With that ability, she can also see energy that is discordant with someone's energy signature and transmute it or remove it and replace it with energy that is for that person's highest good. Kai's greatest strength is removing negative energy and entities from people, places, and things, allowing others to feel better, sleep better, and feel more secure in themselves and their homes. She is a science oriented geek by nature and loves to experiment with energy. With the help of her friends, guides, and ancestors, she is constantly reshaping her understanding of the world and expanding her cosmology. One of the things she enjoys most about experiencing new ways of using energy is that she gets to share what she knows and looks forward to how others will use that knowledge and hopefully return to share something new with her, beginning the cycle again. So, in this episode today, we talk about how Kai discovered her gifts. She shares quite a few stories around how she has removed entities from people, places, and things, how you can do this yourself, what you can do to clear your energy and develop your intuitive abilities, and how to find a mentor and discern who the right mentor is for you, amongst many other things that come up in the episode. So, enjoy. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of I Love It When. I'm so stoked for today's episode. I think I'm already sweating, which is what happens when I get excited. I'm really excited to introduce you to someone that I'm just getting to know, Kai Bertrand. Did I say your last name right? Bertrand? Okay. So I met Kai through Crystal Novak at the MeWe Metaphysical Wellness Fairs, and I immediately knew I wanted to have her on the podcast. And so we finally had a chance to connect just in this last week. And so, Kai, thank you so much for joining me on here, and tell us a little bit about yourself and what you currently do.
Okay. Well, thank you for having me. This is going to be fun. I can't wait to do this. I'm a Hawaiian shaman, born and raised in Hawaii. I now live in the Pacific Northwest. The paranormal and the supernatural have been a part of my life for as long as I can remember. I use my abilities primarily as an energy reader and healer to help people heal themselves.
Mm.
I remove harmful entities attached to people, places, and things. I also assist in removing blocks or anchors in my clients' energy systems. I can also help others connect with their guides and their ancestors. That's pretty much what I do.
Okay. Okay. And let's go back to when you first not decided, first discovered, like when all these gifts started coming out. How did this evolve in your life?
Well, the funny thing is, it's like I didn't actually discover it. My mom did.
Okay.
She knew, like from birth, that I would have gifts, or that's what she assumed. And so as I got older, I would say stuff to her like, Mom, there's a lady in the corner and I can see through her. And she would say stuff like, Oh, did she say anything? And I go, Oh, no. And she'd say, Well, then just leave her. You don't, she'll probably go away. Or if I said, Mom, there's like this thing that's crawling on our ceiling, and she would then bless our house, and it would feel like every window and door in the house got blown open. And um and that was the thing, is like that was normal for me. Like I never
Mhm.
thought anything of it. I mean, when I got to school, I understood that people didn't see what I saw, and I just learned not to talk about it. But at home it was like no big deal. And then later on, my mom, I asked her, I said, why have you never asked me about this? Why have you never said anything about it? You never told me,
Yeah.
don't say that, nothing. And she said, Oh, I knew. And I said, How did you know? And she goes, Oh yeah, she goes, you used to help me out when you were a baby. I'm like, What do you mean? And she said that whenever she met someone that she wasn't sure about, like, sometimes you meet people, you're like, they seem nice, but I don't know. There's something not quite right. So what she would do is like she would get me close to that person. And if I screamed my head off, she knew something was wrong and wouldn't talk to that person. And I was like, seriously, Mom, you're using me as a litmus test? What was that? And she said, You're never wrong.
Mm.
And so that worked out really, that worked great for her. Not that it didn't cause some problems though, because as I was thinking about this, I remembered when I was a kid, and this is a story that they told me. I do not remember this.
Okay.
My brother's first wife, when they used to come over, she couldn't come in our house
Mm.
because I would be screaming my head off as soon as I saw her. So whenever they came to visit, she had to wait outside. She couldn't come in the
Wow.
house ever when I was home. And my mom, you know, and my mom is just like, "Oh yeah, you wouldn't let her in the house. We couldn't like, you know, you were so young that you couldn't tell me why,
Hmm.
but I knew why. There was something up with her." But yeah, for years she couldn't come in the house. And it was funny because when I was an adult, she came to visit our house and she's like, "Can I come in the house?" And I'm like, "Yeah, why can't you come in?" And she's like, "You don't remember, do you?" I'm like, "No." So yeah.
Wow. I love how your mom responded, which I'm sure for people who are listening, if you have any giftings and you're listening and you're like, that's not how my parents responded. Like, I just love that your mom was so open and just and went with it and was confident in it and confident in your giftings. And I think you mentioned this the last time we met that how much more accepted this is in Hawaiian culture compared to the rest of the US. And I think that's which is it's beautiful. It's so cool to hear about it.
Yeah, so it was just not a big deal at our
Hmm.
house. I mean,
Hmm.
you know, we and people sometimes think, you know, it's in an exclusionary process, right? But I mean, I went to Catholic school for most of the time I went to school. So
Okay.
it wasn't a this or that, it was an
Hmm.
and the entire time.
Okay.
You know, there was room for everything. And that's
Hmm.
kind of how I think most Hawaiians function is that we
Hmm.
understand that, you know, we have our different religions that we believe in, but we also don't leave other things behind.
Hmm.
So,
Hmm. So as you were moving through your life and starting to experience more, how did you develop your gifts?
well, the funny thing is, like, you know, because I mean, in Hawaii, life is a little tough because everything's really expensive. So I worked a lot. I went to school a lot. I mean, I just did all the normal things, and I never paid attention to any of that stuff because I just didn't have time for it.
Hmm.
It wasn't actually until I moved here that I actually had time to kind of look at that and expand it, and then things started to change, and I started to the gifts that I have now like started to really develop. I mean, I had some stuff when I was still in Hawaii, but it was more just about seeing things.
Okay.
One of the greatest frustrations I had about being in Hawaii is that I could see a lot of stuff, but I couldn't do anything about it.
Mm.
And so for me, when I came here and I started to actually develop certain skills and understand certain things, I was like, oh, okay, now I can do something about that. And
Mm.
that changed everything for me.
Okay. What did you find that you couldn't do that you wanted to do? You couldn't.
Well, because in the like in Hawaii, normally if you have, like I said, you know, if I said something was crawling on the wall, my mom would do a blessing and everything would go. And we lived in a place that had so many entities that
Okay.
I was literally watching them walk through the walls.
Wow.
And I at that point, you know, I would be doing the typical Hawaiian blessing, but I didn't have enough power at that point
Okay.
to actually make it stick. Like it would be good for short term, but it wouldn't stick. So I'd be doing it like repeatedly, and I was like, this is not working.
Hmm.
And that part of it was very frustrating. And so when I started to really dig into it after I moved here, I was like, yeah, I don't ever want to be in that helpless position again.
Hmm.
And so part of what I teach people, and the reason why I teach people is so that they can stand on their own. They can
Hmm.
do things on their own, and that they don't have to have that helpless feeling of, oh my gosh, there's nothing I can do here, because
Hmm.
it's just not true.
Hmm.
And at the time, like I didn't understand often how simple it can be to do certain things to put yourself in that position of power,
Hmm.
which is why I tell people, no, do this, do this, do that. And they go, that's it? That's all I have to do? I'm like, yeah, just remember to do it.
Yes. Yes. So when you're seeing things, can you describe, do you see them with your own eyes or do you see them I mean, when I describe how I see things, I often say like in my imagination, because that makes sense to people, or like in my third eye. How do you see things?
That depends
Okay.
because most of the time, if I'm looking at someone's energy, I can actually like it's almost like seeing through like a screen door. I can see like
Okay.
the outline, sometimes I can see features, and things like that. And other times like um, if I get sick or something, then the screen drops and they become solid to me as if they're like a person standing there.
Okay.
So most of the time, it's like I see it through a screen, or if I'm doing like a remote view session, then I actually like see it in my head, and and then it looks a little different to me.
Hmm. Okay. Can you describe what remote viewing is?
Remote viewing is being able to like your vision actually is able to see a location that you're not physically at.
Okay.
So, for instance, I can use remote viewing for energy healing. Like, I can actually look into the person's body and see like the energy blocks and look at their organs. I can also transport my vision to someone's physical location and like to their house to do clearings. So that is one of the reasons why I can do energetic clearings of spaces without physically going there because I can actually
Mhm.
see the property and see what's happening with it and see the energy that's happening on a property. So remote viewing allows you to focus your attention and get information visually while not actually being there.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Uh, well, I wanted to make sure to give a little bit of time for you to share just some of your stories because I know for me, and I've shared this before on the podcast, that one of my fears has been of being possessed. And I talked about this with you the last time we chatted. And I recognized that that fear came from television, movies, and probably a bit from the Catholic faith. And so learning more about this has been a goal of mine because I know that once I bring awareness to it, the fear is gone. And so I would love for you to share just some of your stories of things that have happened for you. And because I think it brings a lot of understanding and helps people feel empowered. I know that it's empowered me to realize that there are simple things you can do, like you said, to clear your energy. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's just really interesting how people kind of come upon different things. Like, I was reminded of when I think I was probably about 11 or 12 or something like that. And I was watching, at the time they were running episodes of Bewitched with Elizabeth Montgomery. And I
Mm,
loved that show. I just thought it was really cool. And they had another movie that had Elizabeth Montgomery in it. And it was about Lizzie Borden. And at the
mm,
time, I was little. I didn't know who that was, had no concept of that, right? So I saw the movie and I was just like, okay, yeah, I didn't really care for it. But then I went to bed that night, and right before I fell asleep, there's this person that showed up at the end of my bed, like standing next to the bed, and I was like, who is that? And they were like, that's Lizzie Borden. I was like, what? So, I don't, like I said, I was really young, and I'm not sure if that was actually her or not, but it
mm,
wasn't It wasn't Elizabeth Montgomery. I know that because it was this
mm.
woman who was standing there in his white nightgown with the dark hair, and she just stared at me, and I stared at her, and I was like, "What is this about?" Right? And I just didn't understand it, and then she went away, and after that, I felt okay about it, but I thought, "What was that about?" And so, for people who are developing their gifts, like that kind of stuff can be really terrifying, right? Like you see
Yeah.
these things, and you're like, "What the hell is that?" I always tell people like when you encounter things of that nature, the first thing you do is don't panic
Mm,
because it doesn't behoove you to do that. And it prevents you from actually processing the information. Because if you're
okay.
trying to understand something, if you're panicking, your brain doesn't engage.
Yeah.
So yeah, so it's like so when people who are like listening to this and they're like, yeah, I'm getting these weird experiences, like, okay, well just experience them. Like see it as you've kind of stepped back from yourself and
Mm,
observe what's happening. Become the observer if you can
mhm.
and get as much information as you can because that's to your benefit to do that. All right, so I'm not sure why that story came up, but it did.
No, that's a
Um,
good one. Yeah.
the other thing is like I've been doing my own shadow work, which is basically looking at all the things about yourself that you don't like
Mm.
and figuring out where it came from, how to get rid of it, what energy is anchoring it. I mean, there's lots of things that go into it. But I was in Portland once, and there was this young lady who came up to me, and she sat down in front of me, and I was, and normally at fairs, I just do card readings. I don't do anything heavy duty because, that requires energy, and sometimes it's, I have to put up protective boundaries to make sure that things don't escape and all kinds of stuff. And so she sat down and she said, I think I have a demon in me. And I said, and sometimes people are really serious when they say that. And sometimes people do it because they want attention.
Mm.
And so I say, what makes you think that? And she told me that she was doing shadow work. And there's this process that, is commonly done with psychological practices where you kind of like see yourself as another person sitting in a chair across from you and then you talk to yourself, right? And so she saw like her dark self sitting across from her and she was working with her dark self. And then at some point, which is typical of the shadow work process, is you allow for the integration back into the main self. The problem is that she did not recognize that what she was talking to was actually an entity.
Mm.
So when she allowed the entity to enter, it literally like occupied her body. So when I looked at her, like she finally looked up and looked into my eyes, and I could actually see the essence of her and the essence of the other in her
Wow.
eyes. And I said, "Oh yeah, you're correct." And she said, "Okay, well, can you help me and remove it?" And I said, "Do you want me to remove it?" And I always have to ask because some people have actually said no. And she said yes. And at the same time, both she and I heard the entity say no. Yeah,
Wow.
it was the weirdest thing. I was like, okay. And so I removed the entity from her. And there's a process that I do. Like I said, I put up a barrier so it can't escape. And then, I pulled it out of her and sent the entity to the light. And then what I do is I kind of backfill into the person so that they are filled with really good energy. Because what happens is when something embeds in us,
Hmm.
it leaves a hole essentially because it like makes room for itself, right? So it cuts through everything. And so what I do is I actually backfill that with really good energy that is for her highest good. And then after I did it, it was a little frightening for me because, like I said, every case is different, and I never know what's going to happen. In this case, this woman, she kind of like flopped forward like a marionette with loose strings, and I was like, did she pass out? And then then it's like then she took a breath, and then she looked back up at me, and I was like, okay, you okay? And yeah, it was just her in there, and she was like, oh my gosh. She
Wow.
goes, I feel so different. I'm like, okay. And and then she walked away, and probably about an hour or two later, her whole family walked over to me and
Oh,
said, thank you for giving us back our daughter and our
wow.
sister because she has not been herself for months. And we
Wow.
were worried because she was like behaving in ways that have never seen from her before. We're like, we know she's not taking drugs.
Hmm.
So we're like, what is happening? And
Wow.
they're like, now she's like, she feels how she used to.
Hmm. Oh my goodness, that's an incredible story. Of
Yeah.
course, my mind, because I think of how I operate, my mind goes right to, and I don't know if this is something you can talk about or if it's too long of an explanation or if it's like a whole nother podcast episode. But how do you pull the energy out of someone like that? Or how do you teach people some ways in which they could do this work on themselves?
Well, there's various ways of doing it. Different people have different techniques. Basically, my technique is, I call down what I do first is so here's the basic premise of what I do. I always enclose the space, whatever I'm working on, whether it be a person or a property, in a super thick energy shield. And the reason I do that is because to make sure that there's no outside influence and to make sure that whatever's inside doesn't leave.
Okay.
Because what happens is like as soon as I start gearing up to do this kind of thing, like they actually feel the building of the energy. And
Hmm.
what happens with, and this happens, I cannot tell you how many times with people who do house clearings, is that they clear the house and they don't actually send what they're clearing to a specific location, like
Okay.
to the source or to the earth or to something.
Hmm.
They basically just chase it off the property and then it goes next door. And then when the energy fades, it comes right back.
Okay. Yeah.
So for me, what I do is the first thing is like I put up the barrier, make sure nothing interferes and nothing escapes. And then what I do is I call light in and I flood everything. And it's basically kind of like I'm visualizing, I can see all this stuff. So I'm like, see the light pouring in, it's just kind of like scooping everything that doesn't belong and it runs back out, goes back to source. And then I get like another thing of light that comes in that is like the perfect vibration for whatever is
Mm-hmm.
happening. So if it's like a house, it's like this bubbly, happy, like, very satisfying kind of homey, cozy energy for the house. If it's for the person, it's like this healing, stabilizing energy that makes them feel like they can breathe and that they're comfortable. So it varies depending on who it is. And then after that, like the shield that stays up, I will keep the shield up on them until the energy stabilizes because it takes a while. Because once you do like a major cleansing, that is a complete energy shift, right?
Yeah.
That's going from like hot to cold. Your body and your energy system needs time to adjust.
Okay.
So what I'll do is I'll keep the energy field up to allow them time to adjust. And once they're done doing that, then the energy drops off. If there's any energy left in the field, it's just given to the earth.
Okay.
So that's my general process.
Amazing.
And and different people do different things.
Hmm.
But like I'll tell people, so for instance, years ago, I worked at a bookstore and I had a coworker who was very, very religious, super religious. But at the same time, she was also a counselor. So she's very open minded and willing to kind of work within the confines of, other people's religions. And so we had this conversation about entities. And she's like, I just don't see it. I don't see how this belief system of yours works. And I said, okay, anyone can get an entity stuck to them. And how you can tell is if you're behaving out of character, like suddenly you're just raging pissed off for no reason,
Hmm.
or you're like unbelievably sad for no reason. Like if
Hmm.
there's some extreme behavior that you're doing that there's no reason for, the likelihood is you could be influenced by something.
Okay.
And so she was like, and I told her, okay, in your case, what I would suggest, because of the fact that you are religious and this is part of your belief system, I was like, all you have to do is pray, ask God to remove it from you.
Hmm.
And I said, so just see what happens. She's like, okay. And probably a couple weeks later, I met her and she was like, I have to tell you something. And I said, what? And she goes, what you said actually happened. She goes, I was going through my day and all of a sudden I was like really angry and I couldn't figure out why. And I remembered our conversation and I did. I prayed to God. I asked him to lift it. She goes, and you know what? I actually felt it lift off of me and
Wow.
I felt so much better. She goes, now I understand what you mean.
Wow.
Because I told her, I said, this is just the way I view it. This is just my cosmology. This is my terminology, but it
Hmm.
translates to other things.
Hmm.
It's the same thing by another name in another cosmology. I was like, you just need to understand what the terminology is.
Hmm.
I was like, so it's not exclusive. Again, I guess that's the Hawaiian thing. It's not this or that. It's this and that.
And yeah, I love the way you describe that because I think I realized at some point back in my early 30s that so much miscommunication I had in my life, or like that I see that happens in the world, just has to do because we have different definitions for the same word. So like if like I love the way you talk about cosmology and just understanding that there are it's all about the and. There are similarities, and it's just different words used to describe different things or the same thing. Yeah. Yeah. Well, you answered a question that I was going to ask in that follow-up, that story that you gave, because I was wondering how would you describe that people could tell if they have something attached to them, but that feeling that comes out of nowhere makes a lot of sense. I can even think of times where I've felt that before. Yeah. Are there
Yeah.
any other stories you want to share about experiences that you've had?
Um, yeah, gosh, so many. It's hard to pick because I've had, just really interesting things happen with different people. And um
These
okay,
are
so
great
here's
examples. I love them. Yeah.
a fun one. There's a woman who I don't know what it is. It's like every time she buys a house, it turns out to have entities in it. It's the most hilarious thing. I'm just like, again? She's like, I like the house. I said, yeah, you always buy the haunted houses. Why is that? And so I've cleared two of the houses that she bought. And then she called me again and she's like, you're not gonna believe this. I'm like, let me guess, you bought another haunted house. And she's like, no, I bought a haunted cabinet. I said, what? So because she likes to buy antiques every now and then. So she's like, yeah, I bought this beautiful cabinet to put my clothes in. She goes, but every time I open it, like it feels like something's like jumping out at me. And I was like, really? I was like, what is it with you and haunted things? She goes, I can't help it. And so I cleared her cabinet for her. And then but then she ended up like taking it back or selling it back to the whoever she got it from. I'm not sure. And I was like, well, what happened? It was clear. She goes, I know, but she goes, but then it didn't fit with the decor. So it's silly things like that. But yeah, she's fun. Like I've cleared two of her houses and she was just like, my house is haunted again. So so sometimes it can be fun and interesting. And and again, she did the first thing she did was like, I didn't panic. I recognized that it was a problem. And and I called you, and knowing that it would be taken care of, and it's fine. And that's really the big thing that I want to tell people. It's just like, don't panic. Like, fear is your enemy on this thing, because that's
Yeah.
what they feed off of.
Hmm. Do you think, I think one of the things that I've had as a worry around that fear of possession has been that I would not be aware that I had something stuck to me, that it would like take over completely and it would be like a different Margaret speaking. Is there ever been a case where that happens? Or do you feel like, do people always know?
I think it depends, because as I mentioned before, that there are people who, when I ask them if they want it gone, they say no. That is an acceptance. That is them saying, yeah,
Okay.
they want to keep it and they allow the possession. Most people understand that something's not right. They feel it, right? And other people, even though, I mean, I've had people who say, um, yeah, I knew something wasn't right, but I chose not to do anything about it. So sometimes it's not about choosing to be possessed, it's more about choosing not to do anything about it.
Okay.
And so I have had people, they sat down and they're like, yeah, I think I have something. I'm just like, yeah, I'm pretty sure you do. And I was like, and I'm like, I know that you have time that you're missing, right? When you're just like, I don't know how I got here. I don't know what I did while I was there. Somebody told me I said something. I don't remember that. They literally have missing time because the entity has stepped forward and taken over their body
Mm.
for a short time.
Hmm.
And when it gets really bad is when you get into stuff where people wake up in different places and be like, I haven't been drinking. I don't know how I got here.
Oh yeah. Wow.
And so, but for most people, that's not the case. Like
Hmm.
as soon as you start to not feel well in
Hmm.
some sort of fashion, then people start looking for solutions.
Hmm.
Like, I don't like this. I don't like being out of control. I don't like not knowing things. And so that's the point when people start looking for solutions. Either they go to
Hmm.
their doctor, or they call somebody like me, or they start just doing their own internal check, so to speak, about, like, what is going on with me. And um, which is why, especially in the metaphysical community, one of the things that's really important is knowing your own energy signature, like what your body feels like, what your energy feels like. So then that way, if something attaches to you, you know right away because
Mm,
it's like, wait, that's not
mm-hmm.
me. What is that?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then you can actively do whatever you need to do to get rid of it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I
Because when
actually,
it's,
you're so reminding me of you helped me out last night. I wanted to tell you, because I thought of something you said to me on Friday when we last spoke, and I was at a networking event. There's probably like 40 people in the room. And I was talking to a gentleman who is not feeling very well. He's feeling just malaise is the word that he kept using. I just feel like so low. And I said, "Oh, well, I don't know if you know much of anything about energy healing or about, how energy works." And he didn't really. So we were talking about it. And a few minutes in, I'm like, "Oh gosh, why do I feel like I also want to throw up?" And so I immediately ran white light down through myself and reestablished my boundaries and my bubble. And I felt better, but I had to be very strong with it. And I was like, oh, what would Kai do in this moment? And I just remembered what you said about, I think the thing that really stuck with me is how you had said people don't realize how powerful they are and how much you can really do on your own.
Mhm.
And so that really has stuck with me. So thank you. That was helpful
Yeah,
because I
you're
immediately
welcome.
realized, oh, he's definitely got some energy stuck to him from other people. And yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And, the thing is, oftentimes when someone has an entity stuck to them, it starts off something simple like malaise or just, you know, starting as a lack of interest kind of thing.
Okay.
And that's how it starts. And the thing that people don't realize is that when you have one entity, sometimes you have more than one. And if you are around people who have entities, the possibility is that one of them will transfer to you.
Mm,
So often like in a family, when you have someone who has multiple of them, the likelihood is other family members are going to have them too, just due to proximity,
hmm.
not
Okay.
necessarily because of, that they've done something wrong or they've asked for it or their energy's open to it. It's just a proximity thing.
Mm,
But yeah, people have the option of like once you understand who you are energetically speaking, like what you feel like, what's right for you, what's normal for you, then you
mm-hmm.
can, as soon as you feel a change, like at that point, what you did, bringing the light down, is perfect. I
Okay.
mean, what I did once for a coworker of mine, it was hilarious. Like we're at work doing our thing, and she's like, "Okay, I'm gonna go out. I'm gonna go get me a tuna sandwich for lunch from Subway or something." And I was like, "Okay, we'll see you later." And she comes back and she puts her sandwich down. She walks over to my desk and goes, "Get it off me." And I was like, "How did you just went down the street?" She's like, "I know. And I came back with something, get it off me."
Wow.
And so what I did for her is I did a slightly different process because I could see that what she had brought back was very, very powerful. So what I did is I actually used fire. So like you did with a swirl of light, I actually did with a swirl of fire.
Okay.
And so like I said, different people can do different things. So if people are more inclined to use elements like,
Hmm.
water, fire, wind, that kind of thing, it's like definitely do it.
Okay.
Like use whatever you're most you that you have the greatest affinity for. So in my
Hmm.
case, like it's energy. So I do everything with energy. Do I occasionally use elements for things? Sure. But if your bent is more with elements, use that.
Okay. Okay. Could you share a little bit about what we talked about last time about if you one way that you can see that there might be an entity in your house and how like cats and children and elderly could be more susceptible first or more vulnerable?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you can tell if you have something in your house. I mean, for some people it's like, okay, wait, the lights are flickering and there's
Hmm.
nothing wrong with the electricity. Or these, things keep moving, and it's one thing like if your keys go missing, because sometimes that's just like an obnoxious little fairy that wants to play with you. because sometimes entities like that they're just mischievous. They're not evil, right? I mean, because
Okay.
the way I look at it is they run on a spectrum. So there's some things that are more good than evil, and there's some, and vice versa. And there's some things that are just mischievous. They just like to play. Um, but if you come into your kitchen and all your cabinets are open and things are falling out, like, that's a sign of something big. You could be hearing footsteps, you could be hearing voices. Um, your family could be having nightmares. That's a classic one. Like if your
Mm,
family starts having nightmares, or they can't sleep because, something weird, or the classic is that your closet door keeps popping open.
mm.
I look at stuff and I'm like, yeah, it's always the closet. It's always the closet. Like, don't trust
Why is it
closets.
got to be the closet? Yeah.
Like, I don't know. It's always a closet. Like people, and when I go to clear houses, like that's one of the things I check. I check all the closets because inevitably that's where most energy doesn't flow, because we go in, we close the door, right?
Yeah.
And
Okay.
so that causes the energy
That
that
makes sense.
creates a stable environment where if something decides it wants to move in, it can be there. So yeah, I mean, I've had people who are like, "Yep, I cannot go to bed unless I close the closet door." I'm like, "Okay." And then, I've had people who say, "Yeah, I close the closet door, I put something in front of it, I come back, the closet door is open again." And I was like, "Okay, so that means there's something in the closet, right?" And they go, "Oh." So, but, so it could be any number of things, but, some of the other signs are like, how are your pets doing? Because usually pets react to energy. Like
Mm,
if there's a room that your cat or your dog won't go into, or if there's a corner of the room that your dog keeps barking at, that there's nothing there that you
mm,
can see, assume that there's something there.
mm,
Um, if your pets get sick for no reason, that means that they're essentially taking energetic hits for the family, and they will do so until they die.
mm,
The other thing is that entities who are determined to destroy a family will go after the weakest members first, which means anybody who's sick, anybody who's young, like babies, children, and they will go after the elderly. So, for instance, I had this one case where, um, and I couldn't do much for them. It was a really complicated case. The grandmother, she'd get up and go to work, and she'd be perfectly fine during the day. She'd come home and just feel horrible. She was like sick as soon as she got home.
mm,
And it was happening every day. So, and every day she would come home and she would feel worse than she did the day before, to the point where like she almost couldn't get up to go to work again. And, I told them, yeah, this is not good because it's attacking everything. It's basically trying to wipe out the family one person at a time, and it's going for the weakest members first. And they were in the process of moving, and I told them, yeah, you need to move, and you need to move quick. Basically all I could do for them was pump enough energy through their house and their property and their persons to give them about 2 weeks worth of time before it would go back to being um, what it was when I saw it. Because I told her, I said, honestly, I'm like, I this is so huge. I mean, I saw demons everywhere on the property. I was getting the impression of open portals and potential blood sacrifice. Like I was getting like
wow.
the impression of like death, and just all kinds of like unpleasant things. I told her, I said, honestly, at this point what you need is a priest. And she said, the priest has already been here.
Mm,
And I was like, okay, well, like I said, I can buy you about 2 weeks worth of time. And then, if I have to do it again, I'll do it again. But, you guys got to get out. And so they ended up moving. Um, so it can get really bad. Um, but I always tell people, when you go to, especially if you're buying a house, like really get a feel for it.
Hmm.
Like, don't get trapped by the curb appeal
Hmm.
because people always go, "Oh my gosh, but it's so pretty." And I'm like, "Yeah, until your kid's walking down the stairs in the middle of the night, staring and not realizing what they're doing."
Hmm.
Or you walk into your kitchen and you've got this really creepy feeling because something is following you and you don't see anything. There was this woman that I used to work with. She asked me to clear their condo, and I did it as a remote view. And so it was funny because I was at work at the time and I was on my lunch break, and she's like, "Yeah, can you clear my house?" I'm like, "Sure." And so I remote viewed into her house, and she's like, "Don't look at my laundry on the floor." I'm like,
Hmm.
"I'm not looking at your dang laundry. I'm looking at the energy of your place. I don't care about your laundry." And so I walked into the living room, and I had never been there. And I asked her, I'm like, "Do you have a wall that's mirrored? Like a mirrored wall?" And she's like, "Yeah." And I was like, "You guys never spend any time in there, do you?" She said, "Nope, we never do." And I said, "Okay, and I know why." And she's like, "Okay, tell me." And I said, "Because it's basically like a partially open portal, like nothing can step through yet, but literally there is like a huge entity standing on the other side watching you. And
Wow.
that's why you don't like to be in there because you're being watched." She goes, "Yeah, you know what? Now that you say that, that's exactly what it feels like. It feels like somebody's watching us." She goes, "My kids never want to play in there." And so I shut down the portal, and I cleaned out the whole place. And then she told her husband that, that's what happened. She didn't tell her kids. And she goes, a couple days later, she goes, "You know what?" She goes, "My kids have been playing in the living room right in front of the thing, not bothered at all." I was
Wow.
like, "Okay, good."
That's so fascinating. Where do all like how when you describe what an entity is to people, how do you describe it? Because I was having this conversation the other day with another energy healer that I know, and she actually prefers to not call them entities. I don't know if it's because it scares her or exactly why, but she's okay with energies, with the idea of energies. But how do you describe it?
I mean, for me, it's a terminology thing, right? Whatever you're
Hmm.
comfortable with. I mean,
Hmm.
so sometimes I will refer to them as negative energies,
Okay.
and to me, I don't know, it's almost like a PC version of it, I guess you could say.
Hmm.
I just call them entities because to me, honestly, because, I grew up as a Catholic, they look like the standard demons to me.
Okay.
Teeth, claws, scales, all
Hmm.
that. That's what they look like to me. I mean,
Okay.
other people perceive them differently,
Hmm.
but that's what they look like to me because it's based on my perception.
Okay.
And so, sometimes I know people um have seen an entity, and like I see it as like a little gargoyle looking thing, or sometimes I they look like really creepy little lizards or something like that. And this other lady was just like, I just see like black smoke. That's what they look like to me. I'm like, okay. I was like, that's
Interesting.
legit. I was like,
Yeah.
that's your perception. I was like, as long as you recognize that that is not part of the person that we're looking at, that it is an other of some kind,
Hmm.
that's legit.
Hmm.
It's like people
Okay.
don't need to see things the way I do,
Hmm.
as long as they see them
Hmm.
or they recognize them or they feel them or they sense them or whatever.
Hmm.
Some people get a little bent out of shape because they can't see them. I was like, yeah, but that doesn't mean you can't tell that they're still there. Like
Yeah.
the clairs, there's how many different kinds of clairs? Like use all
Hmm.
your clairs.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I can see them. So yeah, in some sense that's kind of cheating, but that doesn't mean you can't hear them, you can't feel them, you can't sense them.
Hmm.
Um, and you can definitely smell them,
Hmm.
if you allow yourself to do that, if you allow that sense to operate.
Hmm.
I just had it wasn't that long ago, a friend of mine, she was like, "Yeah, I walked past this thing and I smelled this really peculiar smell." And I'm like, "Yeah." I'm like, "That would be an entity."
Hmm.
And she's like, "I've never had that before." I was just like, yeah. I'm like,
Hmm.
they do give off a scent sometimes. And I was
Hmm.
like, and if you smell sulfur, run. Because that's like big bad if you're smelling sulfur. And she's like, okay, good. Um, but yeah, I don't often get smell things either, but some people that's just normally what they do, right? I mean, as a
Yeah.
kid, I used to. I mean, I used to smell cigars and perfume of, while I'm sitting in my room and then this waft of perfume is going past my face. I'm like, what's that about? And I still do occasionally, but not often because, like I said, my sight kind of takes precedence over everything. But
Yeah. So when you're
yeah,
out and about, just like walking down the street, doing your own thing during the day, will you see stuff or do you like turn it off so that you're not seeing stuff all the time?
no, it's like I actually can't turn it off.
Okay.
Yeah, so I see stuff all the time. So yeah, I'm going
Okay.
through the grocery store sometimes, and most of the time I just ignore it. I don't think about it,
Hmm.
because I see it all the time. Like I said, this is my normal. So, it's like going to the mall and seeing more people than there's actually there, kind of thing.
Hmm.
It doesn't bother me. But yeah, sometimes I'll go through the grocery store, and if I'm waiting in line or something, I'll be like, oh, look at that. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. What's that thing? I'll do one of those just to kind of keep myself occupied. But yeah, at this point, I don't really think about it. Like I've been through like the freezer aisle and be like, okay, there's a thing it's sitting on top of that. I'm like, look at that. And I just, it's a point of interest for myself and I just keep going. But most of the time it's like, okay, get in, get out, let's go. I don't think about it anymore. It's just, but a couple of times I had walked through, well, there was this one instance where this person that I've been kind of mentoring on and off, I have this ability to boost someone's abilities for a short time. And so I said, do you want me to do that so you can kind of see what's here? And she said, okay, yeah, let's do it. So I boosted her energy and she just went, oh my gosh. She's like, you see this all the time? I'm like, yeah. And she was like, how do you do this? Because she was like seeing like different entities and different kinds of energies and just
Okay.
all kinds of stuff happening. And she was like,
Yeah.
how do you live with this? I said, this is normal for me. And so that was interesting getting her perspective on it because a lot of times because of the fact that I have what I have, like I
Hmm.
don't realize how fortunate I am in that I can see all this stuff and do all these things. And um so yeah. So having that opportunity gives me that perspective sometimes and reminds me don't take it for granted.
Hey, I'm popping in for a moment to let you know that if you're interested in working with me one on one in a small group, or you'd like to attend one of my upcoming retreats, please reach out or add yourself to my email list. You can go to iloveitwhen.org and scroll to the bottom where you'll see there's a spot to sign up. I also love to speak, teach, and create experiences for small, medium, or large size companies. If you know someone that I should know, please connect us. I'm looking to utilize I Love It When to create global change, and that will require collaborating with all of you. You're all so much more powerful than you realize. Remind yourself of that today. Do you sometimes get asked by your guides or whomever to clear certain things from landscape, like from different parts of wherever you're at, wherever you're living, or
um no, not usually. I mean, usually if one incident which was weird and I'm not even sure what all it was about, but there was one time when I was astral traveling, and which I don't do very often, and it's mainly because my guys are like, "Yeah, you go astral traveling and you won't come back," because I like it so much, right? There was a hurricane that was actually happening in Mexico at the time, and they pulled me out of my body and took me down to Mexico, and I was literally walking on like some dirt road somewhere. I don't even know where in Mexico. It was pouring down rain. Like literally, I could hear the rain, I could feel the rain, even though I wasn't getting wet. And there was a man who was just standing in the rain, and I remember telling him, Like, get inside. It's storming. What are you doing? And he looked at me because apparently I had just appeared on the street. And then I kept walking, and my guides took me to this house. And I walked in, and there was a woman holding a baby baby was bawling. I mean, obviously in some kind of pain or something. I'm not sure. I don't even know what the issue was. And I just said, I'm here to help. But I spoke in English. And of course, she was speaking Spanish. But she handed the baby over to me. And I actually did like some energy work on the baby, and it fell asleep. And then I handed her back the baby. And then I left. Like they took me back and they brought me back to my body. And I was like, what is that about? They're like, this is just something that you needed to do. I
Mm.
said, like, who's the baby? Like, who? And they're like, that's not for you to know. Like, your job was to help the child, and that was it. I'm like, okay. So
How
sometimes,
interesting.
sometimes when people say, like, when they ask why this, why that,
Yeah.
I'm just like, sometimes it doesn't matter. Just do your do what you're supposed to do. Play your part,
Mm-hmm.
fulfill your role, and move
Mm-hmm.
on.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes the why doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm. I think that's been a hard thing for me to accept, but you definitely reminded me of how I've been accepting that more in the last like 2, 3 years, real recently, of just like, I'm just letting it be. I don't need to know why. And just accepting it makes a lot of sense. Interesting. Um, this question I written down was that I want to kind of come back to. From your perspective, what do you wish more people did on an energy level to help themselves? Is there something people can do kind of daily to do a better job of cleansing their energy, cleansing their space? I guess for someone listening, if there's some tips you have for them.
Yeah, I think the big thing is pay attention to how you feel.
Mhm.
Like if you don't feel good and there's no reason for you not to feel good, like why is that? Like what is it? I mean, like, is it just because you just need an internal attitude adjustment? Or
Mhm.
is it, like you're tired? Like define that. And if you cannot, then trust your instincts about what it could possibly be. Like, could it be that you have something attached to you? I mean, because energetically speaking, there's lots of things that can attach to us. It's not just entities. I mean, we can attach cords to other people.
Mhm.
I mean, there's lots of things because we interact with our world on an energy basis. So every person that we talk to a certain degree, we exchange energy. Um, Especially if we're in person.
Mhm.
And sometimes like they can attach cords to us whether they realize it or not, that can end up siphoning off our energy. So for instance, when I first got my Reiki 1 and Reiki 2, I did it in a weekend. By the time it was over, I did not know my name because I had so much energy thrown at me that weekend. But at the end, we had a Reiki share with another group, another class who had taken a class with a different energy modality. And so there was a person who was laying on a table getting ready to get worked on. And when I started working on him, I was like, oh, I smell French fries. And I didn't think anything of it because I thought, okay, well, he just had French fries for lunch, no big deal. And then later on, I went home and I'm talking on the phone to my friend, and I'm like, why do I smell French fries? I don't get it. And then the next day I woke up, I was really, really sick. Like, had no energy, couldn't get out of bed, felt horrible. And I called my teacher and she said, yeah, that person attached energy cord to you. That person liked your energy so much that they pretty much just plugged in to your energy. And that's why you feel sick because your energy is being drained.
Mhm.
So I had to go see her, and then I didn't know how to cut cords at that time. So she actually cut the cord for me. And as soon as she did, it's like, oh my gosh, I felt so much better after that. And so energy cords can be attached to people for various reasons. It could be that they just like your energy, or it could be that they're trying to control you because to a certain degree, if they can manipulate your energy, they can kind of direct what you do with it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's always a good thing for people to monitor their energy system. Again, going back to the energy signature, once you understand your own energy signature, you can remove anything else that's attached to you, whether it be entity, energy cords, or just little blobs of energy that can get stuck in your aura from other people. All that can be removed. Um, be especially aware if the feeling that you get is overwhelming.
Okay.
Any energy that overwhelms your system is not good for you. Um, it might be a form of love bombing, which
Mm-hmm.
is a technique used by narcissists and cults run by narcissists.
Mm-hmm.
It's like anything that makes you like feel like you've just been rolled over kind of thing is never a good sign, whether
Okay.
it's good or bad.
Okay.
Um, so that's, so a lot of people think, oh, but they were so nice.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, yeah, until they're not. And that's how you get into cults.
Mm-hmm.
That's how you get into these situations with abusive people because you get love bombed. And the funny thing is, people think that, oh, that can't happen to me. And I'm like, I know someone who that happened to. And it was a person I would have never thought
Mm-hmm.
could be involved in something like that because the
Mm-hmm.
person was very independent minded, knew exactly what she wanted to do, was very much in her standing in her own power,
Mm-hmm.
except for this one thing.
Mm-hmm.
And she ended up, falling into this thing, wanting very much to be acknowledged by the leader of this group that she was in. And I mean, to the point where she eventually became like a scapegoat for this person. And so it's a lot easier to get into these things than you realize.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, you reminded me of someone that I dated for just like 2 weeks before I met my now partner Tom. And it was like yeah, I have never been love bombed like that before. And it was now looking back, I see I can recognize the signs earlier, but in the midst of it, it's like it's overwhelming. And so your brain's just kind of trying to comprehend. Uh, you also reminded me of I had something else happen after we spoke last Friday that immediately had me thinking about you. And I was on my walk that I take almost every day, just like 2 blocks from my house by a river, and it was getting later, so it's getting a little bit darker. And I usually don't like to walk just in the straight dark. Um, but I knew that I had enough time to do like a half an hour walk. And so I'm going down the path and someone's coming by and he's on like a low bike. It's not like a regular mountain bike and not quite a motorcycle, but it's kind of a strange bike that you don't really wouldn't see like on a walking path. And then he's got a helmet on and I'm like, what are you doing on this path? And so I'm on my phone, leaving a message for someone, actually for Crystal Novak, our friend Crystal. And he passes by and I get this wave of fear that goes from like my head down to my toes. And I'm like so thrown by it that she can see me pausing in my message to her for like 15 seconds because I'm like, I can tell I'm paying attention to my body. What am I feeling? And I'm thinking to myself, ooh, did I just feel something on him? Or is that my nervous system saying, hey, be careful? So it was this interesting moment of like trying to discern. And later on, Crystal said, I could feel the fear through you. And when I asked myself, is this something that belonged to him? I got a yes. Like that was not just my nervous system being fearful or responding to seeing somebody in the dark. That was with him. But I had never, the more I pay attention to my body, the more I can feel those signs at a more deep level, I guess, because it was like immediate and quite profound. So it was helpful. I think it's what just talking with you has been helpful in helping me to continue to get better at discerning what's mine and what belongs to somebody else. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the big thing is like and that's really the point is being able to discern what's mine, what's not mine, and being able to separate that. Because sometimes, especially if a person is an empath, it's really hard to tell because you'll pick up something from somebody and all of a sudden like you feel like this emotion, you're like, where the heck did that come from? But you
Yeah.
think it's yours.
Yeah.
So as an empath, that's one of those things that's really important. Figure out what's yours, what's not yours. And
Hmm.
then that way you can you can deal with things accordingly. Because what happens is when you pick up emotions from other people that are not, they're obviously not yours, that causes you to react in a way to something that doesn't exist, right?
Yeah.
So for
Yeah.
instance, if you're having a conversation with a friend and you guys are just talking and you're just hanging out, and then somebody comes by that is really, really angry, and you pick up that anger, then that translates into your interaction with the person you're talking to. And
Hmm.
which is confusing, not just for you, but for you, the person who's like, where'd that come from?
Hmm.
So being able to understand that designation is really, really important. Um, and for people who are not able to control it as well, I always tell them, you know what, use an energy shield. You don't need
Hmm.
to use it all the time. But especially if you're in a place where there's a lot of people,
Hmm.
there's going to be a lot of different emotions.
Yeah.
Like for a while, when people still went to malls for shopping, I couldn't go when it was crowded because it was like, okay, that one's way too excited. That one over there is like wondering how he's going to pay his bills, but he's still spending money on gifts. That one over there is like losing her mind on, with her credit cards, knowing that she's not going to be able to pay all those bills when it comes. It's like, so all these like emotions and these little mini freakouts and, oh my God, I got to get something for grandma kind of stuff, is like going through everybody's heads. And I'm getting the emotions of all of that all at once.
Wow.
I was like, sometimes I'd be in the mall for like 10 minutes and I was like, I gotta go because I couldn't take it. It was just like
Yeah.
bombarded with all these thoughts and feelings and just like the anxiety of it all, and I was like, yeah, I'm not doing this. And so, I always tell people, like, if you're going to go someplace where there's a lot of people, put your shield up because that makes it easier for you to just enjoy yourself
Hmm.
and not have to deal with other people's whatever.
Hmm.
I mean, that doesn't mean to say that you can't have a shield that allows all the good stuff in. So,
Hmm.
like, if people are enjoying themselves and you can share that in that joy as well. But, like, all the negative stuff, all the panic, the fear, concern, or whatever they have, like, you don't need any of that.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. So, what would you recommend for someone that's wanting to develop their intuitive abilities? I know we talked a little bit about finding a mentor. What does that look like, and what do you recommend?
Yeah. So, if you were, well, so first off, if you want to try to practice on your own, one of the things that I would say is learn to trust what you get. That's the
Mm-hmm.
first thing. Because people always doubt their
Mm-hmm.
gifts.
Mm-hmm.
They always do did I make that up? But then when you think about it, it's like, so for instance, you pass somebody and you hear something about, he has to go shovel the snow or something. Like, unless you were actually thinking about snow shoveling, it's not yours, right?
Yeah.
So it's like you can apply a logical process to it. It's like if that is something that you would normally think about, then yeah, there's a possibility you made it up. But if it's something that's so outlandish that you would never conceive of that, it's like then it's not yours. Trust
Mm-hmm.
it. Um, and and the more that you trust it, the more it will occur. Because the more that you doubt it, it's almost like you choke off the flow of it.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes people get things that come through them that make absolutely no sense. And I've seen this with some readers. They say, "Oh yeah, I got this thing about strawberries. I don't know what that's about." And oftentimes what we do as readers is we try to interpret everything, right? And sometimes things don't require interpretation.
Mm-hmm.
Like I was talking to another healer reader, and she's a medium, and she said that she kept getting this image of a wire hanger, and she was like, what do I do with that, right? Interpretation wise, she was, I don't know what that means. And so finally she just blurted it out to the client, and the client started busting out laughing because the wire hanger was kind of like a private joke in their family, because apparently their family, when they decide to jury rig things, they always use a wire hanger. So it was like a joke within their family, which of course the medium would never know.
Oh
But she
yeah.
was like, "What do I do with this information?" I was like, so when you get weird stuff like that, it has a meaning. It
Hmm.
just doesn't have a meaning to you.
Hmm.
So if you're doing a reading for somebody, just blurt out the information whether or not it actually makes any sense to you, because it's not for you, it's for them.
Hmm. Hmm.
The other thing is, I would say, yeah, you got to keep practicing, and there's lots of ways to do it. One of the easiest ways is psychometry.
Okay.
And for people who don't know what that is, it's basically reading the energy of an object. And it can be like a ring, a bracelet, a photo, a toy, whatever it is. And basically the whole point is just to try to get information about the owner through this object. And like the first time I did it, honestly, I didn't think I could do it. And my friend was just like, she pulls a ring off her finger, she hands it to me, and she goes, "Just shut up and do it." I'm like, "All right, fine." So I'm reading, I'm like, I'm just like, okay, I'm gonna see what I got. And what I got was this image of this older man. He's got red hair, red beard, he's wearing overalls, and he's standing in front of a workbench, like in a garage or something. And I was like, okay, that's what I got. I don't know what that means. And my friend just stared at me. And I was like, what? And she said, the stone in the ring that I had in my hand actually came from an older ring. And that ring was made by her stepfather, who was a man with red hair, with a red beard, who wore overalls when he worked in his workshop.
Wow.
And I was like, oh, okay. So you never know, and it's just fascinating. Um, I remember one time I was reading an object. There was this thing I used to go to, and people used to put objects in envelopes, so I couldn't even see what it was. I could just kind of feel it through the envelope. And I told this one woman, for some reason I keep hearing water dripping in like an upstairs bathroom.
Mm.
I said, I don't know if you got a leak somewhere, but just kind of be aware of that. And when I say stuff like that, I'm just like, yeah, I don't know if it's gonna come true or not. It may not, right? That's just what I got.
Hmm.
And a couple weeks later, she's like, yeah, we had the plumber in. There was a leak in the upstairs bathroom. I'm like, oh, sorry. She's like, no, you actually saved us a lot of money because we caught it early. I'm like, okay, good.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And then the big thing about developing gifts is just kind of like allow, and because developing gifts is not always possible through force of will. We are very driven. Like, if I just keep trying, if I just keep doing it, if I just keep doing it, and for a lot of things, yeah, that works great. Like meditation, yes, you keep trying at meditation, eventually you'll get to the point of stability where things, where you hit your silent point. But there's some things where you can't. Like for me,
Hmm.
like with remote viewing, I worked for months trying to get remote viewing to work for me. Couldn't do it. And then I was like, fine, I give up. If I can't do it, fine, whatever. And then a friend said, oh, can you look at the energy of my friend's house? Because there's something going on there. And, I don't know if it's just the neighborhood or what. So, I get this image of this house in my head, and I start looking at the property and the energy there. And I start describing out loud what I'm looking at. And, I got my eyes closed the whole time, and I do this thing, and I say, okay, well, that's what I got. And my friends are staring at me, and I'm like, what? And then they hold up their phone and they show me the picture of the house that I was looking at. I was like, oh, and then from there, I realized that the ability had started. And
Hmm.
then I just had to figure out ways to use it. But yeah, it's like sometimes it's just you just let go of it, and then it will
Hmm.
develop in time depending
Hmm.
upon your circumstances.
Okay.
And then as far as a mentor is concerned, so if you are at the point where you feel you have your abilities kind of going, but you want help to either improve them, sharpen them, make them much more useful, finding a mentor is a really great idea, but there's lots of things to consider. And one of the things I would say is find one that resonates with you. Like if you walk up to that person and you can have a conversation and everything that they say to you makes sense,
Mm-hmm.
that's a good sign.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's the same thing if you are getting like a reading at a psychic fair or something. Like if you walk up to a person or and they just don't feel right, just
Mm-hmm.
keep walking. Like you
Yeah.
don't have to have a reading with every person that you see. And you may walk through a fair and not feel the resonance with anyone. And there's
Mm-hmm.
nothing wrong with that either. Like you don't have to get a reading every time you go.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and you may decide to get several readings. And what happens usually is people hear the same thing in different ways. That's basically the universe is going, okay, I'm going to tell you again. Let me tell you again
Yeah.
until you figure it out. Um, the other thing is find a mentor with a good reputation. Like talk to people. Like if they've been in the community for a while, like find out what you know about them. And um, if you're going to do a mentorship or you're thinking about it, make sure you understand the commitment required because every mentor is different. Like
Mm-hmm.
some are like, we're going to do this for 2 years. Some of us are like, we're going to do this for like a week.
Mm-hmm.
So make sure that you're ready to do the commitment and whatever it is they want to do with you. Find one that has the same values as you. Um, I've had a lot of people who said, yeah, I went to go take this class with this person, but they were doing things I didn't really like or I didn't really care for. And I was like, then they were not the person that you should be taking a class with.
Mm-hmm.
Because people are people. Um, not all people are good.
Mm-hmm.
Not all people have the best interests of others at heart.
Mm-hmm.
So before you decide to kind of work with that person's energy, understand what that energy is, what it consists of, and how they operate. Um, find one that speaks your language. And what I mean by that is there's some of us who are, like myself, uber practical. Like we like action steps. I like, okay, if this happens, do this.
Mm-hmm.
If this happens, make that happen.
Mm-hmm.
Versus the ones that are like, what you have to do is just allow the universe to bring that energy to you and allow it to sink into your chakras and that kind of stuff. I'm like, that stuff drives me nuts when people talk like that. So if you are just find the person who speaks your language. That's all. The other thing is find one that helps you stand on your own and not depend on them,
Mm-hmm.
because that way lies abuse.
Yeah.
um, the whole purpose of a mentorship is for you to spend time with them and then you fly, little birdie.
Mm-hmm.
Like you don't spend time with them forever. I mean, that doesn't mean that you don't still work with them or you're not friends with them, you don't do projects with them, you don't, you know, do certain things with them. But for the
Mm-hmm.
most part, you stand on your own. When it's done, it's done. Um, and one that can hold space for you as you grow. And this is really important because a lot of times people think that the mentor is supposed to help you jumpstart things. And to a certain degree, they can, but it all depends on you. Like you're the one that determines your growth.
Mm-hmm.
The mentor only holds the space for it. If you're not willing to do it, or if you're not able to do it, or if it's not time to do it, it won't happen.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and you definitely need one that is not afraid to hold your feet to the fire if needed.
Mm-hmm.
Because there are times when, there's things that we don't want to do, but we have to do because of, that is part of the process. That's part of making progress is you need to jump into things that are unpleasant and you need a mentor who can basically light a fire under your ass and tell you to get it done.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah. And just like I said, be careful of the ones that are very, oh yeah, of course, darling, we can do it all. Anything you want to do, like the ones that seem very, very accommodating. And the ones that never tell you no,
Hmm.
those are the ones that you need to be careful of, because, and like, those are the ones that I've often told people, yeah, don't drink the Kool-Aid on that one, because that's not good.
Hmm. I
So yeah,
love your
so those are,
recommendations. Those are awesome. It
yeah,
reminded me too of at the beginning when you were talking about I'm not going to say it right, phrase it right, but it made me think about how remembering that they're human too, like not putting them on a pedestal. Because I definitely found myself in the beginning of my journey, or at different times in my life, just putting people on a pedestal and then realizing a little bit later, oh, wait, Margaret, they're also human. And so if they have not done their own work, uh, I find that those are usually not people that I want to work with because I want someone who's doing the work, has done the work, whatever it is that the shadow work and the things that they've needed to look at to recognize their humanness um, has really mattered. So I'm glad that you brought that up. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
it's like everybody's a work in progress. It's just a matter of like, where are you on that scale, right?
Mhm.
And I mean, there are people who, I would consider above me in certain things, and there are certain people that are below me in certain things, but that's just in certain things. That's not in everything.
Mhm.
And so, I mean, because we had mentioned, Crystal Novak, it's like she knows a tremendous amount of information
Mhm.
that I know nothing about.
Mhm.
But all my stuff is all experiential. Like,
Mhm.
I'm just like, what if we do this? What if we do that? Let's just check that out. Like, can you see that? Can you move that? Like, what are we doing with that? That's what I do. And so she's, so the two of us get together, and she tells me like, oh, about this information, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, what? Then I have to look at it and process the energy of it, and then
Mhm.
then I can take off with it. And it's funny because I just sent her an email yesterday about like this big energy thing that I just did. And so she responded to me last night. She was like, "Oh my gosh, you're amazing! Like, what are you doing?" She's like, "Oh my gosh." She goes, "I have to." She goes, "Now I have to stop and look at what you're doing." Um, so I mean, so everybody operates a little differently with things. And I remember she told me that you were working on soul contracts. I'm like, fantastic. Um, because that's another thing that people don't realize, that they do have soul contracts. And I kind of shock people when I tell people that, yeah, when I looked at my soul contracts with the vows of poverty and stuff, I'm like, I burned mine.
Mhm.
Like, I did not, like, some people are like, we're just gonna tuck them away in the. I'm like, no, no,
Oh
no,
yeah.
I'm burning them.
That's what Crystal and I were doing the other day. I was like, let's get all these out and let's burn them. Yeah, yeah. That's
Yeah.
been one of the most fascinating pieces that I think I've learned too from Crystal and from other people. Just all the different energetic ties to past lives and things that are still affecting me in this current life, but have nothing to do with this current life at the same time. It's been really empowering again to like learn how to do this on my own um and to change things, to change my life myself. I don't know any other way to put it. Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's like you can feel your energy change immediately. I mean, what
Yeah.
I did is, well, I actually, the funny thing is, I had to go back to the Akashic Library twice on that one,
Okay.
because I went in and I have this librarian that I work with. It's like as soon as I show up there, like she shows up there to help me. And so I don't have to go walking through the stacks or anything like that. And I asked her, okay, bring me all the soul contracts that have a vow of poverty that I can burn right now. So she brought me a stack and I burned it. And then I felt the change, but I was like, there's still something going on. Like I did the muscle testing. I'm like, no, I still have vows of poverty. I don't understand. So it turns out that there's the way I view it, the way I can see it, is that there are other documents stored in the Akashic Library that are not called soul contracts, but function like contracts.
Mm,
So you have to be specific. So what I did is I said, okay, bring me all the documents that have the vow of poverty clause that affects this life, that is not for the benefit of this life. And then she
mm,
brought me like a whole bunch of other stuff. I was like, oh my gosh. And then it was like, then it was her who said, okay, these contracts are can be burned, but these contracts are still valid, but they actually have like a clause in them. So these need to be rewritten.
oh
I'm
wow.
like, oh. So now when I go to the Akashic Library for stuff, I'm like, okay, separate the ones into ones I can burn, the ones I need to rewrite, and the ones I can't change. And then that's what I do. I'm like, okay, I got it. So yeah, so it's all these little things that I say, oh my gosh, it's fascinating. So yes, when I tell people, yeah, I can burn my soul contracts, and they were like, you what? Because they're like, is that possible? I'm like, yeah,
Yeah.
they're your contracts. You can
Hmm.
do what you want with them.
Hmm.
It's
It's
like you might not
amazing.
be able to leave with them because some people are like, well, can I take them out? I'm like, this is not like a regular library where you could check out books. Like, it doesn't work like that. I was like, think of it as like a giant reference library where you can't actually take anything out, but
Yeah.
the documents that are active, you are able to alter if you want.
Hmm.
You just need to know how to do it. But yeah, I went through, yeah, I did vows of poverty. Um, what else did I do? Yeah, I did some past life stuff. Um, I can't remember. There's a couple of things that I've gone through and I'm like, nope, not doing that. Nope, not having that.
Yeah. I love it. Well, so outside of this, what are all the ways in which not outside of this, but like for people who are listening, what are all the ways in which they can work with you?
Um,
Because I know this
it's
is not all that you do. You are also a writer, you speak, you do all sorts of different things.
yeah, I for the most part, it's like most people get a hold of me through my email from my
Okay.
website. But I often show my face at fairs like the MeWe fairs that Laura
Mhm.
Lectumayo runs. And I've been doing more online things. The newest thing that both Crystal Novak and I are doing is called Cosmic Conversations. We recorded the first one about a week or so ago, and we're scheduled to do the next one early to mid January. I'm not sure which. And it's kind of like this, where we just talk
Okay.
about different things, and we actually don't have a theme, and things just kind of you know, materialize. But we started that one because we were talking about the monad,
Mm.
which I had no idea that was one of those things that Crystal was like, have you heard about the monad? I'm like, I don't even know what that is. And so she sent me a couple articles on it and I read it and I said, okay, well, I understand the basic concepts that they're writing about. And I just asked my guys, okay, well, just show me what I'm looking at. And then they actually threw up a grid in front of me and I'm like, oh, I get it. And then after that, I was talking to Crystal about it and, about what I was seeing. And then she was asking me like, okay, well, can you see like my part of the monad? And, so we were doing all this work together. And what was really fascinating is when I look at it, like there's almost like these light bright pegs that were in the grid. And I was like, what are these things? And they were like, well, the green ones, that means they're like ready. They're issues that are ready to be dispersed, like be taken care of. So you can actually like pull those out. I'm like, okay. And when I looked at crystals, it was really funny because she had two green pegs and she had a red one. And I was like, okay, so the red one needs a little work. So she pulled the two green ones out and she was like, oh. And then so we are both looking at the red one because I'm observing her
Yeah.
like watching what's happening. And so she starts working on the red one. And now we're sitting at a fair, right? There's nothing
Mm.
going on. But we're like, okay, we're gonna do this. And in my head, I'm actually like, okay, it looks like it's turning yellow. And she goes, yeah, it's turning yellow. And we both went,
Mm.
I was like, where else can you get this kind of experience? So that was really, really wild. And so that's yeah, so Kristen and I have been having a good time bouncing ideas off each other and different things. Like she'll tell me about something and then I'll take it and run with it and then come back and go, I did this. And she's like, oh my gosh. Um, so it's been a lot of fun. And I think that, people who are part of the metaphysical community, like you can have these kinds of experiences as long as you understand what your limits are.
Hmm.
Because I think, sometimes when people hear me speak about different things, they're just like, I want to do that. I want to do that. I'm like, you do understand that I've been doing this for years, like from the time I was a kid. So it's
Hmm.
not like you can just snap your fingers and be done.
Hmm.
I'm not saying it's not possible, but what I'm saying is understand where your limits are.
Hmm.
And the same thing, like with entities. I've had people who are like, well, you know, yeah, I can get rid of entities too. And I'm like, well, good for you. That's great. And, you know, they say things like, well, yeah, I can take on like really big things. And I thought, I don't think that's exactly true because everyone has their limits.
Hmm.
You just need to decide what it is. Like I have a friend who she will sometimes work on energy, clients for energy healing, and she'll come across something. And if it's within her like energy comfort zone, I guess you could say, then yeah, she'll get rid of it herself. She'll just like send it to the light, repair the hole, all that stuff. But then there's been times when somebody comes in and it's got something that is powerful enough that it makes her uncomfortable. Then she'll call me
Hmm.
and she'll say, "Could you please?" And I'm like, "Sure." So while the person's still laying on the table, she's talking to me and and I remote view in and I do all the work and then they continue their session.
Wow.
Um, People often mistake bravado for ability.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
And I always tell people, make sure, especially when you're dealing with negative energy, whatever level it is, that you can actually handle it. Because I've had people who have come up to me and said, you know, I thought I could take it on and I couldn't. And I've been sick because it attached to me.
Mm.
Um, Something's going on in my family now because I took it home. Can you help me? So we should always be aware of what our level is,
Hmm.
like what we're comfortable with, what we're dealing with, and
Hmm.
understand if you've run across something that you're not comfortable with,
Hmm.
it's okay to bypass it.
Hmm.
Just because it came to you doesn't mean it's yours.
Hmm.
Sometimes people say, well, the person came to me, so I had to help them. I'm like, no, the person came to you so that their issue, like whatever their situation is, could be resolved through you,
Hmm.
not
Hmm.
by you.
Yeah.
Because there's some stuff like, am I a medium? Yes. Can I do mediumship? Sure. Am I great at it? No. Why? Because it's not my interest.
Hmm.
So if somebody wants to speak to a particular person and they want to have a really strong connection, I will actually refer them to someone else
Hmm.
because that's their specialty, that's their
Hmm.
interest, that's what they're really good at.
Hmm.
And I want people to have the best of whatever it is to help them do whatever they want to do.
Hmm.
So that's my thing. Like I don't that's another thing I tell people. I'm like, don't try to be all things to all people because you'll never be.
Hmm. Yeah. That's a really good point. I definitely think about that too when I'm looking at potential teachers for myself or mentors or things like that. And for when I'm discerning who I want to have come speak at my retreats or speak at my events, because uh, I definitely recognize in myself there are times when I think I get really excited about the idea of being able to help people. And so I'm like, oh, yes, I want to be able to do all the things. And then, like you said, as I go along in my journey, I'm like, oh, I don't need to do all of the things, nor do I want to. And certain things are probably not my specialty, as I'm still figuring out kind of what is my specialty when it comes to energy healing specifically. So I can tell that one of my things or one of my purposes is to almost be like I don't even know what the right word is, like a directional person. Like people come to me and then I know who to refer them to. Like, oh yeah, I don't deal with that, but I will send you to Crystal or I will send you to Kai or I'll send you to Enmei. So people come so they're looking for the right resource that and they know that uh I only pass people on to someone who I know can help them and that I trust, that I have pure intentions. And I think that's um been something that I really value is just knowing people like all of you ladies that I can really trust have good intentions and have discernment for yourself too and what you want to do. Yeah.
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 Yeah. It's like, I mean, some people are meant to be conduits, which is what you are. Like, people pass through you,
Hmm.
which is okay. Right.
Hmm.
And like, I'm at the other end. Like, I'm kind of like the stopping point.
Hmm.
Right. There's not much that goes actually through me. It's like, I'm kind of like, the end. I'm the station is what I am. And
Okay.
and I'm okay with that. That's just,
Yeah.
that's just the role that I play in certain things. And that's why I always tell people that, they're like, well, why don't you have a YouTube channel? Why aren't you more, and I just was like, people who need me find me
Hmm.
one way or another,
Hmm.
eventually,
Hmm.
and so it's not about, the universe drives plenty of things my way
Hmm.
that's appropriate for me. So I don't have to worry about different things. I mean, not to say that money's not good, because it
Hmm.
is, but it's more than that.
Hmm.
It's more than that for me. So
Well, awesome. Well, I feel like we've kind of hit a natural stopping point. That feels like a good amount we've given people a lot to think about and talk about today. But I wanted to make sure, though, before we end, for you to talk a little bit about your writing. I just love, and I haven't read any of your books, but you were talking about them last time. I wonder if you could share a little bit about the writing that you do.
yeah, I mean, I actually have two books out that are metaphysical. The first is When Things Go Bump in the Night, and that is how to tell if your house is haunted. And
Okay.
that I go through all the stuff about, like, if you're hearing knocking or noises or voices, or you're seeing things and your dog is barking at nothing, um you know all that stuff, and talk about like how these things can develop. Sometimes it's a person, sometimes it's the house, sometimes it's the land. um and then after I go through all that stuff, then I talk about what your options are, like what to do about it. Because a lot of times
Okay.
people go, yeah, the house is haunted, I don't know what to do. It's like, okay, well, here's what you do. Like, you can do your own house blessing. You can have somebody else come in. You can call in your clergy if you're religious. You can call in people from the metaphysical community. If you decide to, on the rare occasion, hire a paranormal team, this is who you do not want to hire. These are the things that you don't want your paranormal team to do and why you don't want them to do it. These are what you do want to do, that kind of stuff. And then the other book is basically about shadow work. And what that book is it was my process of doing shadow work,
Wow.
because there's lots of different ways of doing shadow work. But when I started doing it, I don't use archetypes, because for me they're not that they're not real, but they don't quite work for me. For me, I would spend more time trying to learn the archetypes versus then actually doing the work. So I didn't want to do that. Um, what I did was is I also wanted to incorporate all of my metaphysical practice. Because a lot of
Mm.
times when you do the standard psychological version of shadow work, you just look at your shadow self, which is like your lower self, your unconscious self, your subconscious self, and you leave out your higher self.
Mm.
And in metaphysical work, you never leave out your higher self. You do everything according to your higher self.
Mm.
So if I was going to do shadow work, why would I leave that part of myself out? That just didn't make
Mm.
any sense. And so, and then I incorporated other things too. So I sometimes work with a pendulum, or I work with muscle testing. So I incorporated that into the process as well. It all starts with looking at what your priority list is. Like, what are your priorities? And then actually looking at the priority list and saying, are those really my priorities? Or are those priorities someone thinks I should have?
Mm.
Because a lot of times we adapt a priority list from other people
Mhm.
and they're not really ours.
Mhm.
And then we wonder why we're not achieving anything. It's because
Mhm.
the thing that's on our list we don't care about. And then, then part of the process too is then looking at what is it that I want to work on? Is it procrastination? Is it, some weird belief that I have about something? I mean, there's lots of different avenues where we could take shadow work. and it can be as deep or as shallow as you prefer it to be. And it's a lifelong process. It's not a one and done thing. And once you figure out what you want to work on, then it's like, okay, assume that because you haven't been able to get rid of it up until this point, that there is an anchor for that energy. Where is it?
Mm.
And it could be in your physical body, it could be in any of your ethereal bodies, it could be in a past life, it could be with one of your ancestors. And then, like, walk you through the process of, getting rid of those energy anchors. And then the other part is too that, we could do like have a conversation with your higher and lower self and just see what your priorities are. Like, because it's completely different, because your higher self looks at things from a higher perspective. Your ego, your middle self, looks at like the everyday stuff, and your lower self doesn't care about anything but you.
Mm.
And so that makes a completely different priority list.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so the
Oh,
shadow
I
workbook
love that.
is really about looking at, like, figuring out where the anchors are to get rid of them, and getting like all aspects of yourself on board for whatever you're trying to accomplish. And and then at the end, I have a workbook that goes with it. Is just, I have like what I call the gratitude challenge, which is just writing down 4 or 5 things every single day for as long as you can. Like, what was I grateful for today? And just go as long as you can with that, because then that just adds to the energy of it.
Okay. Awesome. What's the best place for people to go to purchase those? Because I'll put the link in the show notes too.
You can get to it from my website,
Okay.
or you can just go to Amazon. But yeah, there's the shadow work book and the workbook, and then things that go bump in the night. But yeah, all of that is on my website.
Love it.
I also have a Gumroad shop where you can buy if you're interested in energy fields, energy shields, and how to build them, under what conditions, all that stuff. I have a little audio course that you can listen to teach you all that stuff about energy shields under different conditions and all that stuff.
Awesome. Okay. Fantastic. Ooh, well, I can already envision another episode with you at some point, as you have so many good things to share. Thank you so much for just spending time with us and sharing everything that you have. I can tell, I think people are going to be really intrigued and learn. There's a lot of learning from this episode of things that people can actually take and do, which I think is one of the things that I like about you. Like you said, I'm also a very practical person, and so I like to have steps and to actually practice the things. So yeah, thank you so much.
You're welcome. This has been fun. It's been great.
Okay, good. Well, for everybody listening, I will put everything that she mentioned as links in the show notes. So please go ahead and follow her and come to one of the metaphysical wellness fairs that happens in the Pacific Northwest usually. I typically try to come to almost every single one. So if you're looking to meet Kai in person and have a session with her, this is a great place to meet her. All right. Thank you again.
You're welcome.
Oh, before I forget, oh my gosh, I almost forgot my last question. I'm not surprised because I'm so excited. What's your current I love it when for the world right now, for yourself or for the world?
I would say right now, like, I love it when I get to watch someone take one more step in owning their power.
Mm,
Really like that. Like when I see
hmm.
when the light go on and people go, I can do that. I'm like, yes. Love that.
It's a beautiful feeling. Yeah. Oh, I love that. Thank you.